Now we can have our meditation time. This morning, as we settle ourselves in our seats, we get grounded in this space and this time. Feel ourselves rooted in Mother Earth and open to Father Sky. This morning, we contemplate a grateful heart. I cultivate a grateful heart. A grateful heart opens much like a lotus or a rose blossom. It unfolds from an optimistic spirit, that part of my essence that sees only good unfolding. It looks for the good in all circumstances. A grateful heart opens to possibility from the field of infinite potential. A grateful heart appreciates the awesomeness of a sunrise. The unfolding of the hues of red, the reds, the purples, the pink, morphing into shades of orange and the golden yellows. The grateful heart expands in the presence of beauty. In beauty, a grateful heart feels joy, feels love. A grateful heart lives from thanksgiving, always feeling the gratitude for the next right thing about to happen. I cultivate a grateful heart in the silence. In beauty, a grateful heart feels joy, feels love. I cultivate a grateful heart. so it is, so I choose it. Amen. Another deep breath to bring us back to this space and time. Well, we are in week 4 of the Lazarus blueprint. We're looking at a metaphysical interpretation of the Lazarus story. And we've all learned a couple of weeks ago that Jesus represents that Christ essence of our divine nature. And looking up means that we see with spiritual eyes beyond the physical appearances. Now, the subject of our concern is Lazarus, who by all appearances is dead. Now, we know that metaphysically each one of these names, each one of these situations is some part of our own experience. So Lazarus is that in us that has died, gone to sleep. Remember back in step 1, turn away. Roland was caring for his wife Sally, who'd Alzheimer's disease, and Roland was at the end of his rope. He just could not see any way forward in his situation. He was living a Lazarus experience. Then we moved on to step 2, remove the stone. Helen had been betrayed by her friend Molly, and she was consumed in bitterness and anger and resentment. Her health began to deteriorate. Lazarus. And last week in step 3, great expectations, Reverend Donna told us about Ellen's story, a story about an impossible dream. Lazarus, asleep to the possibility. Using the great expectation step, Ellen began to shift her beliefs. She went from impossible to I'm possible. So we've all had a Lazarus experience. And you know, it doesn't have to be a huge, life-altering situation to use these same tools. I had a little Lazarus hiccup last week. And my first reaction to the situation was the usual. I was making up the story about what it meant to me, the impact this had on my life. I mean, it was all about me. I had a Martha moment. Do you remember the story of Mary and Martha? Martha was the one who complained that Mary always got the better part. She got the biggest half. And if you're a sibling, you know exactly what that means. Poor Martha. She's always the victim. She was left with the dirty work, while Mary was out there in the living room entertaining Jesus. Well, in our Lazarus story, Martha again is victimized, this time by Jesus. She was out of alignment with her higher self. She says, if you'd come when I sent for you, Lazarus wouldn't have died. It's all your fault. Well, I'd been doing my spiritual practices, so fortunately, it didn't take me as long as it used to realize I didn't like this rabbit hole in consciousness I was digging for myself. And I could make a choice. I could make a different choice. I could see it differently. I don't have to be a victim. I can look up and change my thoughts. I consciously put my angst aside. I turned away and I gave it some space. So later, I sat down in prayer and meditation. Remove the stone. I opened to the possibility. I engaged my faith faculty. That's what Ellen did in our last story. You see, Ellen and I opened the secret sauce to the resolution of our situations. Faith. That divine power of faith. In our metaphysical, or I like to think meta-spiritual interpretation, so far what we have basically done is we have established that our higher self, that divine part of us, is preparing to wake up whatever has gone to sleep in us, to wake up Lazarus. Well, at this point, I had to go to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary to get a little insight from this thing. So this is what Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, had to say. Bringing this sleeping life to outer consciousness is no easy task. Jesus groaned in spirit and was troubled at the prospect. The higher must enter into sympathy and love with the lower to bring about awakening. I hadn't thought of it in that way before. That my divine essence needs to bring itself to my attention, to become aligned again. That was a different insight for me. But there must be more than sympathy and love. Take ye away the stone. The stone that holds the sleeping life in the tomb of matter in subconsciousness, that thing that's holding us down that we've gone to sleep to, is the belief in the permanency of the present material laws. When we're in that place, we feel like this is it. This is what life is, and we don't see anything beyond that. That stone. So the stone must be rolled away through faith. The man who wants the inner life to spring forth must believe in the reality of spiritual powers. That's my thing, spiritual powers. And must exercise his faith by invoking in prayer the presence of the invisible, omnipresent God. That's when we go into that feeling nature, and with our imagination, we can feel that presence, not only surrounding us, but we are imbued in it. So this reveals to consciousness the glory of spirit. And the soul has witness in itself of a power that it knew not. We can call that forth. So where we are in our story, Jesus is now poised in faith, understanding, and gratitude, and he says, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I know you always hear me. Well, in my situation, reclaiming my Christ nature, my true nature, I could look beyond the appearance of the story I was making up. And with my awareness in this consciousness, I could see the situation differently. I could feel gratitude for the possibilities. And turning to my higher self, that Father self that Jesus called on, in gratitude, aligned in my own divinity, I know that I know that I know. My higher self always knows and answers when I ask. I actually had that happen last night. That meditation just wouldn't come. No matter how I thought about it, how I looked at it, all the resources, it just wouldn't come. So at 11 o'clock, I said, okay, I need some help with this. I invited my angels, my guides, and my beloveds on the other side. Help me out with this. And I went to bed. So at 5 o'clock this morning, I woke up and it started coming. So this stuff really does work. When we know that it is done, an awakened Lazarus consciousness, a new Lazarus is born. And it's that upfront thanks, the feeling of sincere gratitude in advance that turns the key to unlock the consciousness. The Jafolas tell us we need the feeling, the inner fullness of a grateful heart in order to tap that power within us. Strong emotions will overpower an intellectual idea virtually every time. The heart always comes through. Feelings are what activate the powers that make the changes and do the work. Feelings are the change action, are the change behind any action. And only you can change your feelings. Your responsibility then is to ignite the feeling of thanksgiving, of gratitude in yourself. I personally like the idea of gratitude because for me, that connotes an attitude that I embody. It's in me and it flows from me. It's an inside job. Only you can do it. Only I can change my thinking, my consciousness, and my life. We do that by calling forth our 12 powers and core abilities. In this case, faith and gratitude hold the key. Of course, none of the powers actually stand alone. They all work together, but we can choose how we focus on them and how we develop them. What about that time when we know that it's done? Our good is right there, and we are drawing ourselves to it, but it takes a minute. It takes a while to materialize. You got the gratitude, you got the faith, you know it. So what now? The Jafolas say, fake it until you make it. I don't like that. I really don't like that. Now, I agree. I know that our brain is wired so that when we consciously act as if, we're actually creating new neural pathways, new ways for our brain to think. And neuroscience has proven that. I don't have any question about that. But I'd like to reframe the rest of that section. I don't think we have to force ourselves to act or think in a certain way to bring about the change we seek. That section in faking it felt like I was fighting against something. And I'm more apt to draw on my core ability of optimistic spirit, my positive outlook, and engage my imagination to visualize my desired outcome. Using imagination, I can engage my senses in my vision. I can feel myself in my new role. I can see myself. I see my surroundings, what this life looks like for me. And I can see the people, the relationships that I draw myself to in this new situation. I can create those new neural pathways through my visioning. We've all heard how the POWs use this technique in getting through incarceration and even torture. They envisioned a better place. They envisioned something that they enjoyed. And on returning home, most of the stories I heard were about the golfers. When they got home, having played that game in their head, sometimes as much as 7 years, when they went out to the golf course, they played as well as they ever did, and sometimes better. And then there are the athletes who use this same technique, who play games in their head and achieve improved performance in the field. So our faculty of imagination is really powerful. Now, as I was capturing these ideas on paper, I thought, well, what about the power of a grateful heart? Many of you know I am a student of the 12 powers, plus one. So I got to thinking about where gratitude fits in the powers. I scanned them through my body. We have will over here and understanding here. We have imagination. And in the center of it all, in the pineal gland, we have faith. And then back here, we've got zeal. At the top of the spinal column, it sends the energies out through those neural pathways. And then in the throat, we have dominion, power of my word. I have love in my heart space. I have wisdom in my solar plexus. I can draw on all of those. And today's word was divine order. Right there in my belly button. I've got divine order where it's all tied together. And here, I have strength. In my back, I have strength. And then on down, I have generative life. And finally, I have the power to release all that no longer serves me. Isn't that great? We've got all those powers. Gratitude did not fit any single one of them. They all work together. They all support each other. But I just don't see a fit for the concept of gratitude. So I'm exercising my plus one power. My friends, the Holtons, have, and Paul Hasselbeck has made this very clear to me. So the question is, where do I put gratitude? I consider the core ability of optimistic spirit, which allows us to maintain a positive outlook, see beyond the appearances. In optimistic spirit, we look up and we know the good. Good is innate, existing in every opportunity. Well, that didn't say gratitude to me, although I get it that it includes gratitude. Or the core ability of a giving consciousness. At our core, at our essence, one in the field of infinite potential, we live from a spirit of generosity. And this spiritual community is evidence of that. This church runs on shared gifts of time, talents, and treasures. And surely gratitude is a part of that. But it still doesn't say gratitude to me. My friends, we need a subset to add the power of a grateful heart. That's what step 4, upfront thanks, is all about. It's feeling gratitude from the heart. And we know what we appreciates. In our story for our shared experience for this week, we learned about Jim and Tricia's experience. Can you imagine walking into your place of business one Monday morning and finding not only was your best and only salesperson gone, but he'd wiped you out financially? They were beyond a shock and awe. Jim and Tricia had no idea which way to turn. They soon realized there was no salvaging the business. It was a lost cause. An old client told them about the Lazarus blueprint, and they became engaged in the practice. At first, this upfront thanks felt a little hokey, but soon they actually started to believe it. Eventually, out of the blue, the idea came that culminated in a new business, one they enjoyed more, and led to new levels of prosperity and happiness. I had an aha moment when I read that. They gave thanks for the right thing about to happen. The possibilities were open-ended. They had no defined outcome in mind. They couldn't see a specific picture. Their world had been suddenly upended, and they gave thanks for the right thing about to happen. Here's the thing. Our focus today is on upfront gratitude and faith. But there are lots of tools in our spiritual toolbox that we can use to divinely order our best life. It's not a matter of luck or being in the right place at the right time. It's about being in the right state of mind. I'd like to close with Charles Fillmore again as he talks a little bit more about Lazarus. In spirit, all things are fulfilled now. The moment a concept enters the mind, that which is conceived is consummated through the law that governs the action of ideas. The inventor mentally sees his machine doing the work designed, though it may be years short making it do that work. The spiritual-minded take advantage of this law and affirm the completeness of the ideal, regardless of outer appearances. This stimulates the energy in the thought processes that gives it power beyond estimate. This is a step that Jesus took when he lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know you always hear me." So at this point in our story, the sleeping life, Lazarus, does not awake. But the prayer of thanksgiving that is now in action gives the assurance that calls it at the next step to the surface. So next week, in step 5, we are going to say, "Lazarus, come forth." Thank you all for being with me today. All righty. Am I missing something here? Yeah. It's time for our blessing of our tithes and gifts. So affirm with me, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give, all that I receive. Thank you, God, that this is so.